I want you to picture, for a second, the absolute worst family reunion you can imagine. And I don't mean, awkward political arguments over dinner.
No, not at all.
I mean a full-on palace purge. It's 841 BC, Jerusalem. The king is dead, and his mother, Queen Athaliah, she decides she doesn't want to retire. She wants the throne.
And to get it, she orders the execution of her own family, her grandchildren.
Every single one, every male heir. It is brutal, it's bloody, and it is thorough.
It's basically the Red Wedding from Game of Thrones, except, this actually happened. And the stakes were, frankly, astronomically higher than just who gets to sit on a chair.
Right, because in the middle of all this slaughter, there's a nursemaid who grabs one infant, a baby named Joash, and just sprints.
Sprints into the temple, of all places.
And she hides him in a storeroom. I mean, if she trips, if the queen's guards find them, that's it. The entire historical lineage is extinguished.
And when we say lineage, we have to be really clear what that means. This is not just about a dynasty ending. This is the house of David. The entire biblical narrative hangs on this promise that a descendant of David would always be on the throne.
Leading to the Messiah.
Exactly. If baby Joash dies in that nursery, that entire covenant, it potentially just collapses.
Talk about pressure. So welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're looking at the life of that baby, King Joash. We're digging into the accounts from 2 Kings and 2 Chronicles to figure out how a kid who survives an assassination attempt, who grows up to be a boy king, ends up becoming one of the most, confusing and tragic figures in history.
It is a tragedy. I think confusing is absolutely the right word because Joash is just a study in contradictions. You look at the first half of his life and he's a hero.
A complete hero.
You look at the second half and he's a villain. And our mission today is to figure out how those two people can possibly be the same man.
It's the ultimate Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde situation, but it's played out over 40 years. We have to answer the question the texts themselves seem to be asking. How does a king start as a God-fearing reformer and end his life tangled up in conspiracy, murder, and bribery?
Well, to understand that, we have to start with the environment he grew up in. So Joash is saved by his aunt, Jehosheba, and her husband, Jehoiada. And Jehoiada isn't just an uncle.
No, he's the high priest of Israel.
The high priest. So for 6 years, while the wicked Queen Athaliah is ruling outside, little Joash is growing up inside the temple. He's a secret.
A temple child.
Exactly. His playground is the temple courtyard. His bedtime stories are, the Torah. He is completely insulated from all the corruption happening just outside the walls.
And then when he turns 7, Jehoiada stages a coup.
He does. He reveals the boy to the guards. They overthrow Athaliah, and Joash is crowned king.
A 7-year-old king. I mean, I can't even get my 7-year-old to put on shoes, let alone run a country. Obviously, Jehoiada's pulling the strings here, right?
Initially, yes, of course. Jehoiada acts as the regent. But, and this is really important, Joash grows up, and the texts, specifically 2 Kings 12 and 2 Chronicles 24, they paint this picture of a young man who actually seems more zealous than the priests who raised him.
This is his golden era, and this is where I want to push back a little on that whole puppet king idea, because when you read about the temple repairs, Joash sounds like a guy who really knows what he wants.
He does. The temple was in shambles. I mean, Athaliah's sons had literally vandalized it. They took sacred objects for Baal worship. The physical structure was just falling apart.
So Joash commands the priests and Levites to go out, collect the annual tax, and fix God's house. He even tells them do it quickly.
But they don't.
No, they don't do it quickly at all.
The text says the Levites did not hurry. In fact, by the 23rd year of his reign, so Joash is about 30 now, the damage still hadn't been repaired.
So the priests are just dragging their feet? That seems so odd. Isn't the temple their entire job?
Well, it's a mix of bureaucracy and maybe a bit of corruption. They were collecting the money, but it just wasn't making it to the contractors.
And this is where we see Joash really shine.
We do. He calls in Jehoiada, his mentor, the man who saved his life, and he basically reprimands him. He says, "Why aren't you repairing the damage?"
That takes guts. Scolding the guy who, changed your diapers and put the crown on your head.
It shows agency. And Joash actually implements a new financial system.
Yeah.
He takes a chest, bores a hole in the lid, and sets it right beside the altar. People drop their offering in, and that money goes directly to the stonemasons and the carpenters.
He bypasses the priestly middlemen.
Totally.
That's smart. It's basically a dedicated lockbox for the construction fund.
And it worked. The temple was restored. It was reinforced. If you stop the biography right there, at age 30, Joash is a Hall of Famer. He's pious. He's effective. He's holding the religious leadership accountable.
But we can't stop the biography there, and
Yeah.
this is where things get murky. because there's a phrase in the text that just haunts this entire story.
I know the one you mean.
Chronicles 24 says, Joash did what was right in the eyes of the Lord all the years of Jehoiada the priest.
That is the Jehoiada factor. It's a massive qualifier. It implies that Joash's morality wasn't an internal compass at all. It was an external guardrail.
Wait a minute, did we just see him bossing Jehoiada around about the money? I mean, if he's willing to stand up to the high priest about construction contracts, doesn't that prove he had his own convictions?
That is the million-dollar question, isn't it? You can be passionate about a project without being converted to the cause. Joash loved the temple.
It was his home?
It was his childhood home. It was the symbol of his legitimacy. So repairing it might have been about national pride or, personal legacy, not necessarily deep spiritual devotion.
So he liked the building, but maybe not the owner of the building.
Precisely. Or maybe he just knew how to perform the role of godly king, because that's what he was trained to do his whole life. But faith that is only mirrored is incredibly fragile. As long as Jehoiada was there, this strong father figure, the moral anchor Joash reflected that light.
But eventually that anchor is gone. Jehoiada lives a ridiculously long life, 130 years old, the text says, but he finally dies. They bury him with the kings, which is a huge honor. And then a vacuum opens up.
And nature abhors a vacuum. This brings us to the most jarring transition in the entire story. Immediately after Jehoiada is buried, the officials of Judah come to pay homage to the king.
And who are these guys?
These are the nobility, the aristocracy. You have to imagine that for decades under Jehoiada's influence, the royal court was probably very strict.
Very religious, no partying, no idols.
Right. Lots of Torah reading. These princes, they represent the old money who perhaps missed the looser, more cosmopolitan days.
So the strict headmaster is dead, and the cool kids show up and say, hey, Joash, want to come hang out?
Exactly. The text says they bowed low to him, they flattered him, they likely appealed to his ego. You're the king, Joash! You don't need to be under the thumb of those dusty old priests anymore. You can be your own man. You can be modern.
And being modern in the ancient Near East usually meant one thing.
Tolerance of idolatry.
Right. They abandoned the temple of the Lord and started worshiping Asherah poles and idols. And Joash, the man who spent his youth restoring the temple, he just lets it happen. He listens to them.
He does.
But why? That's the part I just don't get. How do you go from drilling a hole in a box to make sure every shekel goes to God's house to suddenly letting people set up idols in the backyard? Is he just weak?
I think he's hollow. That's the secondhand faith problem. If you've never truly internalized your beliefs for yourself, you are just a mirror. You reflect whoever's standing in front of you.
Wow.
When Jehoiada stood there, Joash reflected holiness. When the corrupt princes stand there, bowing and flattering him, he reflects their corruption. He has no face of his own.
That is terrifying. But it gets worse than just bad policy. God sends prophets to warn him, to say, hey, turn back. And Joash ignores them. And then a very specific prophet stands up.
Zechariah. And we need to pause on who Zechariah is. He's not just some random prophet from the wilderness.
He's the son of Jehoiada.
He's the son of Jehoiada.
So this is his cousin, his foster brother.
They almost certainly grew up together. They played in those same temple courtyards. Zechariah is the son of the man who saved Joash's life. And he stands up before the people and delivers a message. Why do you disobey the Lord's commands? You will not prosper. Because you have forsaken the Lord, he has forsaken you.
It's a harsh message, but it's true. So how does Joash react? Does he feel any guilt? Does he remember his old mentor?
No. His reaction is violent and defensive. The text says they conspired against him, and specifically, at the command of the king, they stoned him to death.
He ordered the execution of his own brother.
Yes. And at the location, 2 Chronicles specifies they killed him in the courtyard of the Lord's temple.
The same courtyard where Jehoiada hid him as a baby, the place that saved his life.
The irony is just crushing. He spills the blood of his Savior's son on the very stones that preserved his own life. It is the ultimate betrayal. It shows that Joash hasn't just drifted away, he's become hostile to his past.
That feels like a psychological break. Like Zechariah was a walking, talking reminder of the debt Joash owed to Jehoiada. And Joash just didn't want to owe anyone anything anymore.
That's a very keen observation. Sometimes people destroy the very thing that reminds them of their moral obligation. Zechariah was the living conscience of the kingdom. By killing him, Joash was trying to silence that voice in his own head.
And Zechariah's dying words aren't exactly, Father, forgive them, are they?
Not at all. He says, "May the Lord see this and call you to account." It's a plea for divine justice. And historically speaking, that justice arrives very, very quickly.
Enter Hazael, king of Aram.
All right, Hazael is a brutal military commander. He's sweeping down the coast, he takes the city of Gath, and then he turns his eyes toward Jerusalem. Now remember the golden era Joash, the guy who rallied the people and organized the priests.
Yeah, where is that guy? You'd expect him to call a prayer meeting, arm the soldiers, stand on the walls?
That guy is long gone. The source material from 2 Kings 12 tells us exactly what Joash does. He doesn't fight. He takes the sacred objects, his father's dedicated gifts, his own dedicated gifts, all the gold in the treasuries of the temple, and he sends it all to Hazael.
He pays him off.
He empties the temple to save his own skin.
That is just pathetic. I mean, think about the symbolism there. He spent the first half of his life building up that treasury, collecting those coins to honor God, and now he hands it all over to a pagan warlord just to make him go away.
It shows what the temple had become to him. It wasn't the dwelling place of God anymore. It was just a bank account. It was a political slush fund he could liquidate when things got hot.
It proves the complete erosion of his character. He sacrificed the sacred for the expedient.
And it didn't even work, did it?
Not really. Hazael took the money and withdrew for a moment, but the army of Aram came back. And 2 Chronicles gives us this devastating detail here. It says the Aramean army came with a very small force.
A tiny force.
But the Lord delivered a very great army of Judah into their hands. So Joash had the numbers, but he lost the battle.
He was humiliated. The text says they executed judgment on him. He's left severely wounded, his treasury is empty, his nobility is dead, and his reputation is just in tatters.
Which leads us to the grim finale. He's lying in his bed, wounded in the palace.
And this is where the two sources, Kings and Chronicles, give us that really fascinating stereoscopic view. 2 Kings gives us the political report. His officials conspired against him and assassinated him. It reads like a standard coup. A weak, failed king gets removed.
But 2 Chronicles gives us the why.
Right. 2 Chronicles 24 explicitly says they conspired against him because the blood of the son of Jehoiada the priest.
It all comes back to Zechariah.
It's cause and effect. The theological lens shows us that the political assassination was actually the answer to Zechariah's dying prayer. May the Lord see this and call you to account. Well, the account was called.
It's wild to think about that duality. I mean, if you were a reporter for the Jerusalem Times back then, you'd write the story as disgruntled generals remove incompetent king.
Of course.
But the spiritual reality was judgment falls on the man who betrayed his family and his God. Both are true at the same time.
They are. And the final insult. When he dies, they bury him in the city of David. But the text makes a point to say they did not bury him in the tombs of the kings.
Wow. So even in death, he's excluded. He started as the heir to David, the miraculous survivor, and he ends up being barred from the family plot.
It's a final verdict of disappointment. He had everything. The lineage, the miraculous survival, the best mentor you could ask for, all the resources, and he just squandered it all because he never took ownership of his own soul.
That's the heavy takeaway here, isn't it? It's so easy to judge Joash, to call him a monster for what he did to Zechariah. But the path to that moment started way, way earlier. It started with just going through the motions.
It started with being a disciple who never actually became a leader. You know, we often talk about the danger of bad influences, but the story of Joash warns us about the danger of dependence on good influences.
That's profound. Can you unpack that a little bit?
Sure. If your character, your ethics, your faith, if those things only exist because your parents or your spouse or your pastor are watching you, then they don't really exist.
They're a performance.
They're a performance. And the moment the audience leaves the room, the performance stops. Joash looked perfect as long as Jehoiada was watching.
The second he was gone.
The moment he was gone, Joash collapsed. He was like a vine that had climbed up a trellis. You take away the trellis, and the vine just falls into the mud. He never developed his own trunk.
So if we look at this whole deep dive into the rise and ruin of King Joash, what's the challenge for us? Because, hopefully none of us are planning to stone our cousins or empty the national treasury.
I think the challenge is a kind of internal audit, a mentor check. Think about the strongest positive influence in your life, the person who keeps you on the straight and narrow.
The person whose opinion you value most, the one you really don't want to disappoint.
Now, just do a thought experiment. Imagine they'd gone. Just removed from the equation entirely. If that person disappeared tomorrow, would your character remain standing? Would your beliefs hold up? Or would you, like Joash, just start listening to the next loudest voice in the room?
Would you still be you? Or are you just a reflection of them?
It's an uncomfortable question. But Joash forces us to ask it. A good start guarantees absolutely nothing. You have to own your own ending.
That is definitely something to chew on. From the nursery to the throne to the murder of a prophet and a shameful death. The life of Joash is a wild ride, but a necessary warning. Thank you all for joining us on this deep dive. Stay curious, ask the hard questions, and we'll see you next time.